And we are live. JT here, and welcome to The Huddle. The Huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you, whether you are watching on YouTube or whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my friendly reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. So my challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation, to remove any distractions and get laser focus on the here and the now. And I guarantee you, you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. I've been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest. And like we often do in life, some of the best ideas are ones that we act on. So, I felt inspired, wanted to learn more about his journey to greatness, invite him to join us today. And he's like, absolutely. My guest in the huddle today is currently serving as the defensive coordinator with the Guelph Gryphon Football program. My guest in the huddle today is Coach Matt Berry. How are you today, brother?
Very well, JT. Looking forward to a good week.
Absolutely, brother. Before we get kicked off, pun intended, I just want to take a moment to count my blessings. And for me, this is a daily practice. Some days I do it better than others, but I do find the days I'm most consistent counting my blessings. I find those days are filled with a little more love, a little more joy, a little more peace. And I'm a big proponent that the biggest blessing you can give anyone is your time and energy. So just want to thank you again for blessing us with some of your time and energy here today, brother.
Thank you. Anybody who dedicates their life to these kind of pursuits is someone that I always have time for. The game can teach us so many lessons, and so delving into that is a great way to look at it. And when I talk to my players, I talk to them about a great commodity in life is time, and that one compliment you can give another person is not wasting their time. So make the most of those opportunities.
Awesome. Well, I'm enthused to dive a bit more into your journey. But I'm curious, one of the things that we often like to do in the huddle is to remind everyone that life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. I had a coaching colleague and a great friend that would remind us that, hey, we all have these things that make us unique and different, and our responsibility really is to celebrate them. So I'm curious, what's an interesting fact that maybe a lot of people don't know about you that you'd be open to sharing with our community today?
Interesting fact. Good question. I'm somebody, I've lived a number of places in my life. My dad was a military guy, so I moved around a little bit. I've had the opportunity to live in Europe a couple times and sort of expose myself to different cultures, different ways of living, that kind of thing. So, I had the opportunity to live in the Netherlands a little bit when I was a kid, when dad was in the military, and got to visit there. I had a friend run a hockey school in Sweden, so I actually went over there and lived there and helped him run that for a little bit in a training program. And then I had the opportunity to coach football in Germany for a season. So, those kind of varied experiences were very cool, very eye-opening to the pathways that the world of sport and the connections you make with teammates and people can really provide you. And then just getting to know all those different people and realizing that, there's a lot of barriers that people perceive in the game, but when you go out there and you do something you love and something you're passionate about, you can figure it out. When I was coaching in Europe, I had guys from 9 different countries on my defense, and not a lot of common languages. So we worked as translators, or it deteriorated down to kind of being gorillas at the zoo at times and just mimicking each other. So it was definitely a great experience. So I'm somebody that I just love that, and I love history. That's my background as an academic. So anytime I can wander somewhere old and learn something new, I'm a happy man.
It's interesting, like hearing you share a bit your life journey. It's really a great reminder on the power of being open to diversity of thought, diversity of experiences, and just really being that proverbial world traveler.
Yeah, no question. Like, I think that's one of the blessings that this game gives us, and that most sport interactions give you, is that they introduce you to people that you may not meet in your life, they opened the door to adventures and experiences. And that's the way I approached a lot of that was, somebody was like, hey, I'm going to see my aunt here this weekend, would you like to come? I think that you can take on those challenges, and that it can open doors. And I think, the big vehicle for me with sport has just been those connections and the people.
Mhm.
And that's what drew me to the game of football, was that as a kid who moved around a lot, and a kid who was an only child, it was all of a sudden I had a family in place. And that became the community, or became the gateway to new communities. And I think that's an excellent part of our world, and something that people, when they reflect on it after many years, when they're not buried in the competition and buried in the intensity of it,
Yeah.
it's what did we gain from this? And most
Mhm.
of what we gained had nothing to do with yards or wins and losses.
Yeah. Absolutely, and a great reminder on the power of sport. So I'm curious, you've had a very diverse path, as you were just highlighting. You were first a high quality athlete. You won a Vanier Cup as an athlete, and then you transitioned into becoming a high quality coach and have won a Vanier Cup as a coach. So I'm curious, sport has obviously played an important role in your life. It's allowed you to travel and see different parts of the world. But beyond that, I'm curious, is there a life lesson that you found within sport? And again, I know you could probably share many of them, but it's a lesson that you still find yourself applying to other areas of your life today.
I think you have to find ways to apply yourself to your passions. And I think that,
Mhm.
in aging over the years and watching adults ahead of me and my peers as we progress through life, I really operated with a mantra of that you have to smile when you get up in the morning, because if not, life's going to be hard and life's going to be long, because there's things that test us. And so, if you can create a world where your life brings you joy, and you're doing something in your day, even if it's an hour of it because you're a volunteer coach, or it's your entire job if you're a lucky guy like me on the good days, that it's something that you're passionate about. And it was a decision I made when I committed myself to making coaching my career, was that I knew how much I loved this, and I knew the joy it brought me, and I knew that I could allow it to guide me to have a good life if I could make that happen. And it was the same as a player. You cared about the game, you cared about your teammates. So that was the joy, because we all know that as we progress through life, and as the real world and daily life comes at us, there are things that challenge us. There are things that we must endure, we must survive, we must get
Mhm.
past. But if you balance that with things that you love and things that you care about, I think that's it. And I think, that's been my connection to sport. And that's been that thing that, has been that light, no matter how challenging times have been, or how life can be, or how days can be. And we talked to the players a lot about that over the years, that when you step in the door to the stadium, it's got to be like, you got to leave those other things behind for that little bit. You got to be where your feet are, and you got
Mhm.
to you got to love that moment. And you got to, whether it's the compete, whether it's the camaraderie, whether it's the mental challenge of it, whatever it is that draws you to this game, it's critical it is a source of light, and it is a source of joy. And I think that's very important. When I first meet with any player, whether it be a recruit or a new guy on the team, I talk to them about, why do you love this game? What do you love? Because it's going to test us. And in a lot of cases, it doesn't love us back. Football doesn't
Mhm.
love us as much time. It's a bad relationship in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
because there's a finite lifespan to everyone. You have so many games as a player. Somebody's going to turn out better than you, or your body's going to say it's had enough.
Mhm.
It's the same with coaches. You got to go get W's at some point, or you just can't be a nice guy who does a good job because somebody's paying for it at the end of the day. So, what is your relationship? What is it that, when this job becomes challenging, or as a player, when it's cold outside, the body hurts, the scoreboard's against you, what is it that triggers that love? What is it that triggers that joy? Why is it you're doing this? And, I think that that's a big question guys have to ask as they dedicate more time of their life to it. When you go from high school, it's a pastime, and some people are very committed and very passionate. But when you move to university, it's progressing towards being a job. It's 30 or 40 hours a week at a minimum. And you got to say, is this value worth what it brings to my life? Because some people just think, oh, it's a part of my life, or oh, my parents think I should do this. And if they don't love it, they're not going to get the most out of the experience, no matter who they are or how talented they are.
Mm. Appreciate you sharing that insight. And what really resonated is you used words, words like care, love, joy came up often as you were sharing. So why I find that interesting is those words sometimes you don't really hear about them a lot in sport. Like, I mean, you hear the old cliche, like love the process, but we don't always hear a lot of coaches and high quality leaders talk about like find joy. Like, why are you doing this? Is that something like finding the joy? Is that something that you've always naturally done, or did you have like a great teacher, coach, mentor, parent that really helped you to sort of understand, like, find your joy, allow it to spark you, and figure out why you want to do this?
Yeah, I think my parents were really big supporters of, what you were passionate about, what you enjoyed. They sort of let me follow my path in those things. So, I think there was always roots of that there. But I think, to be honest, it was almost a internal reflection in that I saw a lot of people in the world around me maybe doing things that they weren't very passionate about, and that, it
Mhm.
kind of took a toll on them. I saw members of my family that did jobs that paid the bills, but they hated being there every day. It was that very much boomer lunch pail mentality of the
Mhm.
world. And that was I saw that they didn't have that same level of light in their lives. And I think some of my peers as well followed their family into certain industries, or did the job that their mom or dad thought were the right thing for them, and they struggled. They don't enjoy it. They look forward to Friday afternoon at 5:05 p.m. more than anything on the planet. And I can't approach it that way. And so I think it was an evolution of as I matured and started to say, okay, I got a lot of years of earning a paycheck and being a grown up ahead of me, but how do I do this in a way that it isn't a job, or isn't a an obligation. I
Mhm.
think that's the frame it has to take. And I had some coaches in my life that I saw how passionate they were about it, and how much they enjoyed it, or how these guys worked a full-time job, had a family, and then were still showing up to practice, giving up major hours out of their lives because those 2 or 3 hours were something that just made them so happy. And so it was one
Mhm.
of those things where hey, wait, can I just do this? Like, can I just have this part that is the happiness? So I think that's where the process came from it, and how I evolved and how I thought about it. And it was kind of like I got into high school coaching after university, and I was like, I like this. Like, it made me tick. Like, I was still finishing my degree at the time, and I'm sitting there drawing plays or thinking about the next team we're playing instead of listening to what the professor had to say.
Mhm.
And that kind of said to me that probably what was going on in that class was not where I wanted to spend the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I think that's how the whole thing connected. And then I think the bonus of this job is people. And like, I enjoy people.
Mhm.
I was an only child, which meant my life was kind of quiet at times, but it meant family and friends were super important to me. And
Mhm.
my mom was from a big family, and the big family feeling was like some of my happiest memories. And that was a place where like I thrived and I enjoyed it a lot. And so it's like this business has allowed me to create that family on a yearly basis and create those connections. And even going back to high school, caring about those kids as a coach and wanting them to do things with their lives, because I was seeing that their peers and that people at that school weren't doing those same things. And so how can these guys use sport as a vehicle to better themselves, whether sport is the destination or sport is just the thing that opens some doors and opens your eyes. Some of
Mhm.
the best players I've coached, football wasn't the ultimate path. It was the doors football opened and the connections they made that allowed them to become the highly successful young men they are today.
Mhm. Mhm. You touched on a number of different things there, and two things really stuck out there was this idea, like you said, like the joy. And it's interesting because I feel like we live in a world where, and I think of that quote, right? Like comparison is the thief of joy.
Yep.
And it's interesting because we live in a time where people, social media can be a beautiful tool, but we also know some of the challenges. Do you think this idea of joy, I mean, you work with some, high achievers, high performers. Do you think the idea of joy especially in the world of high performance sports. Do you think that those lessons are easier, harder to teach these days? Like, do you think, do you find the young people really resonate with them? I'm kind of curious from your experience, what you're noticing.
I think it's a part of their maturation. I think that, when they come in the door as a 17, 18, 19-year old, they're still finding themselves, they're still finding their vision. And, it's interesting when I have my sit downs with the guys at the end of the season, I talk to them about, okay, let's talk about 1 year from now. I said, and then let's talk about 3 years from now. And then, let's talk about your career here, so let's talk 5 years. And some of those guys have trouble with thinking past 1 year because their brains haven't gone there. And then, I hit them with, okay, what's grown up you up to? And, some of them are, oh, I'm going to be an accountant. I'm going to be an engineer, and some of them just stare at me blankly with like a little bit of a slack jaw moment. And, but, so for a lot of those guys, though, I talk to them, I reframe the conversation and I say, okay, what does your life have to contain? 35-year-old you, for you to get out of bed most days with a smile on your face, what does that life have to contain? And I think that, part of our challenge in North America is that career identifies us more than other parts of the world. I've learned that from traveling other places, people are identified by their family, by their pursuits, by their passions, far more than they're a teacher, a lawyer, a fireman, whatever. Whereas North America, your career really defines you. And as someone whose career probably over defines him at times, I'm glad that the over definition is rooted in joy and rooted in a work with people far more than just rooted in the paycheck that comes along with it. So I talk to the kids about, what does that life have to contain? Are you going to be someone who gets married? Are you going to be someone who has kids? Is football still going to be a part of your life? Are you going to be that guy dominating the old man touch league, or are you going to be coaching some kids up? Is fitness an important thing in your life? Is fitness something that could become a career or not? What is the importance of community? What is the importance of religion if they're a religious person? So what are these elements that will compile the total of their life? And then it's like, is there a career path that can emerge from that? Or are they someone who is intelligent enough to know that they have to have a job that provides them that life? So that's the balancing aspect. So maybe that career is a very heavy job that takes a lot from you, but if it provides the resources to have that life that they enjoy, then that is the balance that they need to strive for. So, and I tell them, a lot of them still can't answer a ton of those questions because they're 19 years old. And, 18 and 19-year-olds are probably the most unpredictable commodity in our universe. But, I think that what I ask them to do is, when it's quiet in this world and when, they're on their own and they're off their phone, the wheels should be turning a little bit. Are you thinking about, what does make me happy? What does bring me joy? What does my life have to contain? Am I a family guy? Like, is my family super important to me? Okay, well, then I can't be thinking about a career that takes me miles and miles from my family. What are the things, what are the elements that are going to be very important to me? And, that's a reflection that they need to have as they progress, because ultimately, we're coaching them up. We want to win a lot of football games, but, we're producing them as excellent candidates for success in real life. And that's the bridge we have to form here. And that's the journey that they're on. And although they don't see that vision whatsoever, a lot of them, the very young ones, they have to start forming those ideas and they have to start working towards something. And so, I think that's the mentorship component and the responsibility we have as coaches is to help them on that journey. And that's the value of their experience in this building as much as it is, perfecting their game and their frame.
Appreciate you sharing. And, it's interesting hearing you talk. Like, you're an educator at heart, right? Like, football is your vehicle to teach these greater life lessons. Eerily similar to, I know, what Coach Capiello does there with asking what's your 1, what's your 3, what's your 5-year goal. So really, really similar. One thing though that was really cool was, I love how you're inviting them and you're challenging them in a loving way to actually like stop and think about what the journey could look like, right? And just the way you frame questions, what's important to you? Are you going to be the type of person who, and it's really, you're teaching them that those are decisions, those are behaviors, that's not who they are, right? So I love how again, you're just guiding and through the power of asking them thought-provoking questions.
Yeah, I think that's what it has to be. Recruiting and much like managing guys, it's a conversation. All of this is like you said, it is a long-term lesson, or it is a course they are undertaking in this process. And so, it's not about forcing thoughts on them, or it's not about, providing them true examples. It's about allowing them to navigate the path. I talk a lot about a great organization is the structures for success.
Mm-hmm.
From an academic perspective, we provide an academic coordinator, we provide tutors. But if you don't get your butt out of bed and go to class or write the paper, I can provide the greatest framework in history, but you got to do the work. And it's the same as a student athlete. I got great coaches that coach you up. We're going to run a good practice, we're going to run good system. I got a strength and conditioning guy that's going to work on you to be bigger, stronger, faster. But if you don't do the work in the dark when no one's watching, if you don't get your butt out of bed, if you don't spend the extra time, you're not going to reach that potential. And so, that's what they have to realize, is that from this point forward, there's no one there to hand them anything. And that's what the world is that's coming at them. And they have to make the conscious choices of the paths they choose and how they apply themselves to the challenges that come ahead. And that's the preparation that they have to take on to be successful.
Great reminder in the power of choices. So I'm curious, you've had a very diverse path, as we've talked about, right? You chose to take a different journey, and you chose to leave Calgary and come, back to Ontario. I'm curious, what was the inspiration behind that idea? What inspired you to want to serve as the new defensive coordinator at the University of Guelph?
I think I had reached a point where, I'd been at one institution for nearly 15 years and, had probably had every job in the building except one. And so, it was that point of where if I wanted to push myself to ultimately be that head coach and be that leader, I had to see how other people did it. And I had to challenge myself in a new conference where I faced new teams, expose myself to what they do, and also expose them and their programs to what I can do. And, it was that I needed that platform for where I had peaked in what I could achieve in that location. And so, it was, where can I find a situation where I can do that successfully? And in terms of, the move here, I knew the staff that was being assembled, I knew the backing, the resources that it had. And then the community intrigued me. I had been a guy who had attended city schools. I went to the University of Ottawa, I went to St. Mary's. Those are city schools. I coached at the University of Calgary. So those are all commuter environments, whereas Guelph is very much it's not Antigonish, it's not the small town, but it's a town, and it's a university town. And I thought that there was something intriguing about that it was something I hadn't experienced, something I hadn't connected with. And that's the first thing I've noticed in coming here, is the feeling of home that there is with how this facility and the connection of these players, and how many guys live within 5 minutes and live on campus, that they're present, they're here, they're around each other all the time. It's very easy to assemble the troops, and it's very easy to do things as a group. And when events occur, you're getting 60 or 70 guys showing up. And it's as much that they are passionate about hanging out with each other as it's just a more convenient model. It's not something where parts of your team live a 45-minute drive from the facility. So it's an interesting framework and experience there. So, I just felt like it was the right choice. I knew the things that were going on here. I knew the people involved. And I just thought, if there was a time to make that decision, now was the time, and that this was a great opportunity. And I knew the people in charge, and, I have great faith in what Mark brings to an organization and how he's going to run and how we can work together. And, I think that's something that excited me. Obviously, I then had to discuss with my wife and, ensure that she was on board for such an adventure. And, there have been peaks and valleys through this process, as I am here. She is not yet. But ultimately, it was one of those things where, again, she was supportive of the path I chose, and how this was something that I needed for myself and my career, and that, she was up for the adventure.
I love that. And most importantly, I guess if anyone takes away the importance of happy wife, happy life, which is something I
Yes.
put in. But really sounds like for you, it was sort of this challenge, right? For you to continue to learn and grow and evolve into, a stronger, more powerful leader, right? To test yourself and to really surround yourself in a new environment. And it sounds like it's really a greater sense of community that you're experiencing in Guelph right now.
Yeah, no question. I think, I got here and, it's one of those things where I felt very welcomed. I felt very,
Mhm.
drawn into this world. And then, yeah, I think from the challenge perspective, it's new teams, it's how can I learn? And even from a recruiting landscape, this is the largest province in the country. There's the most high school football teams playing. It was somewhere that I didn't do a lot of work in the past. So now, to dive into that,
Mhm.
to get to know the programs, to get to know the people involved, to get to connect with Football Ontario. I think those are things that have great value in the football landscape. You see the number of talented players that emerge from, this region that
Mhm.
I would love the opportunity to work with, and just being that guy who now comes in the door and has to have fresh eyes and not know every kid's story and every kid's mom and dad and every kid's little brother and their high school and their high school coach and what they've done, all those things. It's interesting for me to just see that group in that way and to sit down with each of these young men and get them to tell me their story. Some of them were kind of nervous for the fact that I set a meeting with each and every guy, and they walked in and I was like, okay, tell me your story. And I said, whatever you're comfortable with. I said, I want to get to know you. I said, this is the start of a conversation of me getting to know this squad and who you are and what you're about and where you're
Mhm.
from and how you got here in this chair across from me. And it was very interesting. And then just getting to learn all the little hidden things that the world doesn't know about a lot of these guys. What
Mhm.
are they passionate about? What do they do to bring themselves that joy? One of the conversations I have with all the guys is, okay, if you had a day tomorrow with no responsibility, what do you do in that day that you go to bed saying today was a good day? What does that day contain? Who do you spend it with? What do you do? What do you get up to? And you learn a lot about guys. There's one young man on our team who's developed a recent passion for photography. So he'll go and he'll take pictures somewhere for an afternoon with a friend of his. And that was a very interesting thing to learn about him. A few of our guys are really into cooking these days. And man,
Mhm.
a couple of them showed me the photos they have Instagram for their cooking, and it's quite impressive for an 18 or 19-year-old to be
Yeah.
producing dishes that look like that. I know as someone who likes to cook and enjoys food, I do not have those skills in terms of making it look that good. Hopefully it
Mhm.
tastes that good as well. But it's very much about those connections and building a new community and finding those roots and understanding it all. Just even going to football camp last weekend, it was playing the game of, knowing all the helmets, being able to recognize all the helmets. Where are these kids from?
Mhm.
What's their connection? Who's their coach? Those kind of things. So, it's very refreshing after, that time in one place and knowing it very well that now it's that sparked my brain in terms of, okay, wow, I gotta relearn some things. I gotta be the new guy. I gotta figure out how to do things. And I think there's an excitement to that at times, because I think if we get too settled in a place, sometimes it comes a little too easy.
It's interesting as you share that, and as you sort of, it's really easy, right? Like we're sort of trained and conditioned to seek out what's safe and comfortable, right? We like that's just human nature. I love how you shared a few minutes ago about this idea of like bringing, fresh eyes, right? Whether it's, meeting someone for the first time, new situation. I'm curious your perspective on this as someone who naturally, wants to approach situations, with a fresh set of eyes, someone who has been immersed in a lot of different, experiences, different parts of the world. How important is that for leaders to be able to approach, situations with a fresh set of eyes, whether meeting people for the first time or just approaching a situation and just challenging yourself to maybe look at things through a different lens?
Yeah, I think it's critical, and I think it's very important that as a football person that we view ourselves under that lens as well, because I think
Mhm.
that if you're not doing that inner reflection on how you do things, how you can be successful, that, it's a failure from the beginning if you don't do that to yourself. And then, yeah, when you
Mhm.
come across new people, new experiences, new opportunities, how do you view them and how do you understand that? But I think it's also, how do we refresh our eyes? I think that sometimes on a football roster, we let a first impression harm us, or we let the off field impression of a player color our on field perception of him. And I think
Yeah.
as a leader, it's very valuable to be focused on what someone truly should be evaluated. I think that
Mm.
sometimes we allow outside factors to be too much of it,
Mhm.
or we allow perceptions, or, in our industry, we allow like measurables to really affect us. And, there is value to them. But at the end of the day, the package might not look right, but if it plays right, you got to let it play.
Mhm.
And, I think sometimes that's a danger in this business, is that, um, we we make snap judgments. We're quick
Mhm.
to judge, and I think that, slowing your roll on that sometimes
Yeah.
is important. We had some recruits in the building last night from minor football, and we were talking to them about, how to make a first impression to a coach, how to form a highlight tape, those kind of things. And it is true, we have a short attention span. But the way I frame it to them is, you have to get it to where I want to have a second conversation. So the
Okay.
win you're trying to achieve is that you want to spark my interest. And then from there, it's how do we progress to where this conversation ends up favorable for you?
Mhm.
And so, I said, whether it's what you write in your email and presenting yourself in a good way, or when you meet a coach, shaking their hand and introducing yourself and doing all those things to color that, or, that your highlight reel grabs attention, because, we're going to see a lot of those and you got to draw us in. But three plays on a highlight reel are not going to determine your future. I got to now investigate and I got to continue that conversation. And so, first impression is key, but first impression has to be an opener. And that's the thing. First impression more time can be a closer. So, you have to be careful about that, the impression you're making allows for continuance. And so I think that that's critical for young people to realize, is that, how do I best represent myself? Like, that's what I talk to recruits about, is that you are in the business of marketing you. That's the way
Mhm.
you have to think about it. And it is, what is the best version of you that you can put forward? And in ticking those boxes, it is, okay, am I a great player on the field? Yes. Okay. Am I a great teammate? Am I a great student? Am I a great community member? Am I a great guy in the gym? They have to realize that it is a lot more than the highlight tape. Because I said, in this digital age, a lot of people can put together 10 plays that you say, wow. But now all of a sudden, is what's it that distinguishes the 10 guys who have 10 great plays? Why is it that we want this young man as a member of our organization? So, I think that it's interesting that impressions are one thing, fresh eyes are one thing, but it's, how do you navigate the progression, or how do you reset? I think that that's what a great leader is someone who knows the next steps and has the vision to pair with that initial perception.
Mm. It's interesting as you share that, right? It's really like you talked about, the power of reflection, like truly understanding who you are, being able to identify what are my gifts, my talents, my abilities, right? And then showing in a way where you can kind of cut through the noise and just sort of highlight this is how I can best help the team or the program or the organization.
Yeah,
Okay.
no question. It's about roles, it's about, what is the value you bring to the table?
Mhm.
That is ultimately where this world goes. And that's where it becomes harsh at times. And
Mhm.
so if you're not conscious of your value, or you're not reassuring that you bring an impact or you bring a value, then that's very, that's where you're setting yourself up for failure.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, we've been talking about, some of the changes that have happened at Guelph and you can see it, you can feel it. You can hear like other people are sensing and feeling the energy shift. Curious, you know, what's what's this new era gonna usher in terms of, what can what would you like to see happen over the next 1, 3, 5 years?
Well, I think the first and foremost, the goal is to really coach these guys up to build that
Mm,
connection, lay the foundation. You have to have that where the people in the building, you start to build that trust. It's a very interesting relationship as the new guys, they have to trust in my knowledge of the game,
mm,
but I have to build that trust. I have to show them that that is there. And then they have to gain my trust and their ability to work and to execute and to commit to that plan. So it's an interesting dynamic that has to occur, and that foundation has to be developed, and that's paramount. That's why my first priority here was meeting with every single guy one on one to get to know them, know what makes them tick, know what
mm,
drives them, know where their focuses are, and especially know how they learn, because there's so much learning that's occurring now. So I talk to them a lot about what type of learner are you with football? How do you connect with the game? You know, are you a guy that needs to see it? Are you a guy who needs to do it? Are you a guy who needs to rep it a million times? What is the connection for you? How do you learn in this? And even having that conversation tells you some things about some guys. But that is the foundation. And then the 1 year goal has to be a playoff team. It's got to get that winning record. It's got to get in the playoff picture, because when you get into late October, November, special things can happen, because you only got to win 60 minutes. You don't got to win 5 or 7 games. You got to win 60 minutes. So, that's an easier goal. That's more attainable once you get to it. It's 1 week at a time. You're living on the edge. I think the 3 year goal is to pursue a Yates Cup, to be that team that plays at a national level. But in this entire process, it's got to be developing the guys in the building, having that foundational understanding of what we're doing system wise, and being strong fundamental football players. One of the biggest things that we forget in this world of flash and scores and highlight reels and Instagram experts is that if you can't block and you can't tackle, you're not good at football. And so, we got to get back to those fundamentals. And
mm,
players have to understand that before you do the pretty stuff, you have to do the basic things. You got to get your feet in the ground. You got to train your eyes what to do. You got to be able to use your hands. You got to know what you have to do. You got to know what your toolbox is, and you got to be able to use the right tools. And then foundationally, you got to stop the run. No matter who you are in football on defense, you got to stop the run. Because if you stop the run, then they got to create a play where the percentage of success goes down. Because in passing, there's a snap, there's a throw, there's a read, there's a catch. There's multiple elements that can go astray in that much quicker than in the run. And so,
mm,
you got to get into a world where you force teams to become high level executors. And if they're high level executors, then credit to them. If they're better than you on that day, well, their coaches get paid and their players work hard too. So, that's excellent. But that's got to be the 3 year goal. And then 5 year, who knows? We got to
yeah,
tick off 1 and 3 before we start talking about the lofty aspirations.
yeah,
It's a stage. Ultimately, I'd love to say national contender and playing for our dear friend Mr. Vanier.
yeah.
But we got a few hurdles to climb before that, and there's some pretty darn good teams in this conference that play at this level, and ultimately you're striving to beat the French kids. We
Mm,
got to get into a business where we're producing the best 22 and 23-year-olds in the world, because
mhm,
we're going to be playing against a lot of 24 and 25-year-olds when it's cold and when there's a trophy on the line. So,
mhm,
we got to be those business people where we got to have that model where those guys develop into that elite player by that age group. And, I think that's the progression of everything that's occurring here. And obviously we have to attract the talent. This is an excellent football experience.
mhm,
This is a place where you're going to get developed on every level. You're going to get supported, and it's a great place to be. This feels like home. It's somewhere you enjoy to be. And I think, that's something we have to establish. We have to get people to know our brand, because
mhm,
right now, a lot of people across the country may not know who we are or what we're about. And we got to
mhm.
start to spread that word, but it can't just be a lot of talk. We got to back it up with action, and we got to translate that into some success on the field. So, that's how we got to push ourselves forward.
Mm. It's interesting. A lot of the things you talked about, the trust, the focusing on fundamentals, the, sort of taking it to your proverbial proponents, right? Forcing them to do something they don't necessarily want to do, right? Stop the run, force them, to make big plays. it's interesting how a lot of that is looking within, right? It's like focusing, we talk about like control the
Yep,
controllables, right? It's we're look
100%.
within, we're going to focus on us, and that's going to put us in the best position to be successful in the game of life.
100%. Like football's excellent and crazy at the same time, and that it's played one play at a time.
Yeah.
So there isn't that flow to the game. You got to live in that moment. You can't go back and change the last one, and you
Mhm.
got to be clear in your mind. You got to be, you got to be Dory, and you got to forget, and you got to get on to that next play and not think about the last one because you got to live in each snap. And that's the thing, is that we got to put together more good snaps than bad. It's kind of like life, like more good days than bad, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to go 60 for 60 great plays on defense in a game. That's not going to happen. Like, nobody's going to be perfect. Nobody grades out at 100%. But it's, how do we come out on the good side of that?
Mhm. Absolutely. So I'm curious, I want to be respectful of your time. So I got two more questions.
Certainly.
One, again, you being new to this Guelph community, right? It is like being on campus there for, it feels different. It just feels, I don't know. I've always said it feels like a very innovative, very close-knit community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if someone said to you, coach, what's the biggest draw? You just moved to Guelph. What do you think is the biggest draw for a potential student athlete to want to come to Guelph? Like, what do you think is the biggest selling feature?
I think it is connection. I think it's that, this is their home. It's a place where we're present. Our meetings are here, our training is here, the facility is excellent, the players are here, there's a community amongst them. Like Coach Joe interviewed each of the first year players to ask, what did they wish they knew when they were being recruited here now that they've been here for a year? And almost overwhelmingly, the answer was how close the team was, how much the guys got along, how much time they spent together, how supported they would be, how they would be a member of a community immediately. So, I think that is the value that we bring, that this is your home for the next 4 or 5 years, and that there is a true sense of that term.
Mm, love that. So I'm curious, Coach, again, one last question. I want to be respectful of your time and energy. If someone is, has interest or curiosities have been sparked, what's the best way for people to learn more about Guelph, even just start to follow along the journey and just kind of, start to explore whether Guelph's the right fit for them? What would be the best way for them to connect with you or just follow along in the program?
Well, I think the most passive one would be, following us on Instagram. Our social media team is excellent. They do next level, production, following, all those kind of things. That's just something that's blown me away here to begin with. So, that would be the passive. If they want to actually start to build that connection, it would be reach out to Coach Joe as the director of player personnel. He's in charge of the recruitment side of the business. Reach out to him, fill out the player profile on Front Rush, get us your information, get us your film, and then find those opportunities for us to connect, whether that's a conversation by phone, over the internet here, or whether that's us coming to an event, a game, a camp, summer ball that's coming up, Football Ontario stuff.
Mhm.
Find those ways for us to see you in person, because I think that the personal connection is an important part of this process. As digital and virtual as our world has become, sitting across from a person and having that chat, seeing them do it live and in action, I think those are of great value. And I think, that's sort of the next steps in the process. And then in terms of becoming informed, we'll provide you with that information. We can connect you with the right people at the university to make sure that you're pairing that academic journey, and that
Mhm.
component is of, high value, because ultimately, the football experience is great 4 or 5 years for the lucky few, another 4 or 5 years as a professional. But ultimately, you got to pay the bills for 30 or 40 years after the fact. So we got to get you on the right educational path, so you got some skills to move into that working world when that time is come.
Absolutely. I love the reminder as a educator at heart. I appreciate the reminder of taking care of, your academic house.
Yes,
And
definitely
and
a
we'll
huge part of the journey.
and we'll be sure to share out the links for the Guelph Griffins football and Coach Joe and the recruiting tools in the description on YouTube and on the
Perfect.
podcast. Coach, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for the great man you are, the great husband, the great coach, educator, but really the great human being you are. The one thing that I've really taken from this conversation, I really want to thank Coach Saria for suggesting that we connect, is just, again, just your message on like what brings you joy. Why do you love this thing? Like it's just such a simple reminder, but one we need to hear in high performance sports. So I just want to thank you again for reminding us about the importance of finding what brings you joy.
It was a joy chatting with you, JT. So I'm happy to be here. Happy to do this.
Absolutely. So, folks, Coach Barry dropped so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. But as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's a consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually creates greater results in your life. So my challenge to you is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. And my only ask from these conversations, if it resonated with you, if it touched your heart, then please share it with a friend, a loved one, a teammate, just someone you think that would benefit from listening to these positive, inspiring, and empowering ideas. The more people we have listening, understanding, and applying these simple principles to their life, the more blessed this world will be. As always, love having these conversations with you in the huddle. Have a blessed rest of your day, everyone.